In the gospel today, we hear about this Easter afternoon. So Jesus is just raised from the dead. No one's seen him quite yet, although there's been some reports of angels and all these things. And these two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem. They're going to Emmaus. They're going in the wrong direction, as it were, as opposed to staying in Jerusalem. But Jesus is walking with them. And their eyes are prevented from seeing him. And in this we hear about the format for the Mass, right? First we have the liturgy of the Word as Jesus breaks open the Scriptures to them. And then, later, he breaks the bread. And whenever you hear these words, he took, blessed, broke, and gave. Those are words associated with the Eucharist. Those are at the Last Supper. Those are at the feeding of the 5,000. These are all images that always point back to the Eucharist. And so when we hear about this image of the Mass, about Jesus giving us the Word and the Eucharist, we hear then these two disciples, they say, "Stay with us. Stay with us." Because it looked like Jesus was going to go along farther. Now this is important because Jesus never forces himself on us. He will never force himself on anyone. Though he invites, he draws, he lures, but he will never force himself into our lives. And so he invites them, he lures them in by the burning of their hearts as he's broken open the Scriptures. And they say, "Stay with us. Stay with us. We want to know you more." And it almost seems weird because then as soon as they recognize him, he vanishes. They said, "Stay with us," and he vanishes. What's going on here? Well, he's come to a new manner of being present to them. That he is now present to them in the Eucharist. He took, he blessed, he broke, he gave. And with that, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. And then they say how they recognized he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. And so often in our lives, we're also crying out to God, "Stay with us. We're struggling here. We're having these problems. Life is getting too hectic, too disturbing, too much problems. That there's just too much problems. That's great English, isn't it? That there's just so much that weighs us down." And God says, "I'm with you. I'm with you. I've promised to stay with you to the end of the world. Will you recognize my presence?" Here he is, present to us in the Eucharist. That we can come any day of the week, any time of day or night, and be present to him in the tabernacle. As our chapel is open all day, all night, every day. We can come and be present to the Lord in those times when we need him. And even more than just his physical presence in the Eucharist, which he allows us to adore, then what happens? He allows us to receive him into our bodies and into our souls. His very presence, body, blood, soul, and divinity. He wants, what's the word we use? Yesterday we had confirmation and First Holy Communion. He wants communion with us, to be deep in union with our hearts, with our souls, and even dare I say, with our bodies. He wants this communion with us. And he wants to stay with us. As we cry out, "Stay with us, Lord. Stay with us, Lord." Problem is that after we walk out of these doors, a lot of times we're no longer focused on the presence of Christ that is now present within us, in union with our hearts, our minds, our souls. Some of the saints, some of the mystics asked Jesus, "How long do you stay with the soul after it's received communion?" And here's the answer he gave. 10 minutes, 32 seconds, no. No, that's not the answer. He didn't give a length of time. He said, as long as the soul wants me to. Some, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, prayed for the grace that he would be present in her sacramentally until the next time she would receive communion. And she believed that God gave her that grace, that she was constantly allowing Jesus' presence to overwhelm her being. And so often, as soon as we get out of the church, our minds are somewhere else. We forget the God that is present within us, especially if the God that's present in the other person in that other car cuts us off. And we forget really quickly. Do we really want Jesus present with us? That He comes and fills us. He wants to transform us. Sometimes that can be sad, yes. But that does mean that there are times when we have to look at, what am I watching? What's my entertainment? How am I treating the people around me? Because, whoa, that might be driving Jesus' presence out of me. Are we asking, do we really want Him to stay with us? He will. He wants to be with us. He is with us all the time, of course, in so many ways, but He comes to us so powerfully through the Eucharist, in communion, not just talking to Him, but now present within us. May we this day recognize, have our eyes open to the presence of Christ in the Eucharist and how He comes into us so powerfully through communion. And may we allow Christ to stay with us, to remain with us, to abide in us for more than 10 minutes and 32 seconds, but to abide with us on an ongoing basis.